Okay, go ahead, Dan.
All right. Well, I am K1RAU, K1RAU, originally licensed as KC1BPI, KC1BPI. So my journey into ham radio started when I was 11 years old. I got my book, which was only about 16 pages on the study guide and everything and how to become a ham. And I started learning Morse code. And when I had just turned 12 years old and was asked by some fellows to join a band because I'm a saxophone player. Well, saxophone player band kind of took precedent over the ham radio thing, but I eventually got my license. A friend of mine said, look, I'd like to get my license. And I said, oh, good. I've been hounded and badgered by people all of my life for this. So I said, I'll pay for the study guide. I'll pay for the test and we'll both get our licenses. And I got my technician license 57 years later after I started studying for ham radio. And I have been a ham now for over 7/10 of a decade, just to give you an idea, put a real footprint on that. And for those of you that don't know how long that is, I'm not going to tell you because it sounds impressive. I enjoy just the fun part of the hobby. I'm not a contester. I tried a few contests, HF contests, and early on, and they drove me crazy. I'm a type A personality and I didn't need anything that would make me more hyper. So I enjoy rag chewing, just, occasional chats on the repeater. When I'm out here in the office and I'm just doing paperwork and don't have customers, I turn on the HF rig and scan around and talk to people. I've talked to people all over the world. Matter of fact, my first HF contact was such a fluke, it wasn't even funny. It was one morning about 2 a.m, real early. I was out here playing around. I was fascinated because I had just become an extra. I went from technician in 2014 to general exactly a year later. And then 2 months later, I got my extra. And I got my extra because I'm lazy, not because I'm ambitious. I just didn't want to have to remember where to quit turning the dial and didn't want to transmit in an unauthorized part of the band. Well, I was out here listening through the radio and just going along, and I heard this Australian call come in. And it's funny because it surprised the tar out of me. So I responded back, and the fellow says, "Oh, K1RAU," in his Australian accent. He said, "That's New England up there in the States." And I said, "Yeah." He says, "I know a guy named Rao. Worked with him on the Olympics back here in Sydney." And it turned out it was a fellow named Jeff Reynolds who I worked with. He works for ABC, that's the Australian broadcast company. We talked for about 10 minutes or so, and then the bands changed. I never heard from him again. And it was funny because I was so shocked I didn't even write down the frequency or his call sign or anything, but I was grinning probably for 3 days because my first HF contact was somebody I knew on the other side of the world. And so I play a lot on that and became involved with the club. I actually belong to NVARC, the Neshoba Club also, but they meet on the same night. And I joined CMARA, and because it's a lot more fun, it seems like, and have been enjoying it ever since. If you know friends who have been putting it off to get their license, tell them to go ahead and go for it. It's not that hard. And if you apply yourself, you don't even have to work super hard to get your license. And it's a lot of fun. And thanks for listening. This is K1RAU. I'll be clear on your phone. Oh, no, wait a minute. That's a whole nother thing.
And Dan makes the best food at field day.
Right.
And hopefully next year we'll be able to have that now.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of people. There were a number of reasons why we didn't do it this year. One of them was the amount of work it is involved. And number two is the lack of confidence in the contact thing. So I'm hoping next year will be supercalifragilistic.
Great. Thank you, Dan. All right. Let's see. Brian, I think you were thinking of doing one. Would you like to go next?
Sure. All right. I'm Brian, K1BML. I'm the club president, and I got my start in ham radio 2014 on December 24th is when I kept checking the website and found out it was on there. So I was able to actually transmit that night. I took my test in Millbury with the MMRA, the MMRA club, and I passed. I started listening a lot more. I actually I would say I had a mic shy moment or for this part of my career starting out. I got my ticket in December 24th when I could talk, and I didn't actually start making contacts until around April, I think. So I did listen quite a lot, as I was told to listen for the technique and all that. And after hearing how after listening to how people were interacting on the repeater and everything, it was just like listening to friends talk that have known each other for years. And then when I started talking, everyone come to find out no one really knew anyone. Everyone just kind of talked on the radio, but there was some sort of like camaraderie that came along with it. And then after meeting everyone and my first field day and everything, and my first public service event, my first public service event was actually the Boston Marathon in 2015. And it was ridiculously rainy and wet the whole day. And thanks to a ham that I met there who gave me a Gordon's Fisherman yellow rain jacket, it saved my butt that day because all I brought was one of those little plastic disposable dollar ones. So he saved my butt and my equipment, which at the time I only had Baofeng, so it wasn't waterproof by any means, but it was a great time, great experience. And I have volunteered every year except for this year since. So looking forward to it again next year though. But public service is the way that I went in this whole thing. My father started out with his CB and he loved the CB. On Sunday mornings, I would listen to him shoot skip, talking to people in Alaska, enjoying himself with his modded CB radio that did 14 watts with his big, Solamax Icon antenna outside strapped to the tree. And he was loving his life. And I enjoyed the CB. And when he passed away, I was left his brand new CB equipment that he never got to use. I started using it, but here in Oxford, there's really not much around. So there was nothing. And W1AAM showed me his little setup at his house. I saw what he had going on his desk and his station. And there was a radio here that was blinking. There was people talking here. It was actually, who was it? He had a conversation. Of course, I'm blanking right now, but he was talking to someone and it was like they knew each other forever. And he had this radio going over here with the public service and another radio going over here. There was just frequencies everywhere. And I didn't even know what I was looking at or listening to, but I was hooked at that moment. So I started studying for my test. And 2 weeks later, I ended up taking the test, passing it. And yeah, it was all downhill from there. I met the CMARA guys and oh man, my life's never been the same since. Excuse me. But it was Willis. I can't think of Willis's call sign right now, but he was talking to Willis I was the first person I ever heard talk on the radio was Willis. And that was it. I was hooked. So from that, I ended up starting out with a UV5R, Baofeng. And all of you who know me know about my addiction. And that was a bad thing right there. But now I have my wonderful setup here with all my mobile radios. They're in my truck. They're everywhere. My wife would prefer them to be not anywhere, but nevertheless, they're here. They're a part of my life. And I have learned that since my son was born that there's not really as much time in the day as you'd like to have. And excuse me, some priorities kind of have to take step. I guess they say it's a hobby, right? It is a hobby and your priorities come first, but I love it. I listen to it all the time. My radio's always on somewhere and I'm always hearing something. I'm listening to 9/7 and I enjoy it. It's nice to know, but the camaraderie that I have learned through ham radio and through the people I've met and the friendships that I've made over the past couple of years Yeah, it's something I'll cherish for a long time. And Greg, the years of experience that you have in ham radio, I only pray that I could get maybe a couple more than you have. Preferably not as much radios because I don't want to have all that space for them. But you guys know a lot. You guys have taught me a lot over the years, even though we didn't sit down with a chalkboard and everything. Trust me, I've learned a lot from you guys, and thank you for all that. So that's why I got into ham radio, and that's why I love ham radio. So thanks very much for the opportunity, everyone. I appreciate it, and thanks for all the knowledge you guys have given me over the years. Greg, I guess you're up now. Any questions or anything? Anyone want to criticize me? Comments, concerns?
All right, Brian, very good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And all right, well, let's see. My name is Greg, WA1JXR. I live in Lancaster, Mass. I got started, I was probably around 12 years old. I started getting interested in electricity. I can remember going to the library in elementary school and looking at various books and things, and started playing around, wrapping a wire around a nail and hooking it up to a dry cell and making a magnet and fooling around with that kind of stuff. And of course, we'd gotten walkie-talkies when we were kids that were Citizens Band. I don't know, I think they were like Channel 14 or something. But we started fooling around with those. And then my first sort of entry into radio, so to speak, was I found a book in the library, and it had an article on how to build the foxhole radio. And I guess it was basically a crystal radio, simple AM or detector. And so I can remember asking my mom to save the cardboard tube from the wax paper roll, and I can still remember the look on my dad's face as a 12-year-old asking him for a Gillette blue razor blade. And it turns out the detector on the foxhole radio was made from a Gillette blue razor blade, a safety pin, and a piece of pencil lead. And that's how I made the detector. But anyways, made the radio. Luckily, we had a local AM radio station in town that was only about a mile away from the house. So I had plenty of signal, and with the piece of wire I had hung out in my bedroom window, I was able to hear the AM broadcast on the foxhole radio. From there, we kept. Later on, I did get a CB radio, and there was three of us kids in the neighborhood who were sort of interested, and we kind of chummed around and played around with different things. We worked on different radios. We used to go down to the local TV shop, and the guy in the TV shop would give us old TV chassis, and we'd lug those things home, and we'd scrap all the parts off it, take the power transformer out, and capacitors and resistors. And of course, as kids, we didn't have any money for parts, but that's how we got our parts, and that's how we built things. And then let's see. When I was going into 10th grade, they had just built a vocational school in our district, and so I was able to transfer from the high school that I was going to the vocational school, and they had a electronics program, so I went into that and took classes there for a couple years. And I didn't really know, what I wanted to do, but luckily the teacher I had in that class, he was a retired lieutenant commander from the Navy, a really sharp guy, really nice guy, and he, I guess, recognized that maybe I had some talent and insight for this kind of stuff. So he asked me, well, what are you going to do after high school? And I said, I don't know. I mean, neither of my parents were, college people, and as far as I knew, I wanted to be a TV repairman or something, But he said, well, you should really try going to college. And of course, they didn't call it community college back then. They called it junior college. So he convinced me to enroll in Rhode Island Junior College, and I went there and got an associate's degree. Went there for a couple of years, and I did really well. I enjoyed that, so I transferred after that to the University of Rhode Island and got a bachelor's and master's degree in electrical engineering. So ham radio really sort of paved a way into the career that I had, and it was good. After college, I went to work for Raytheon Company in Sudbury, Mass, and worked for them for 42 years. I was a senior principal engineer working on radar systems, doing a lot of RF and microwave work. And I retired at the beginning of 2020 from Raytheon Company, and now I can enjoy ham radio full time. As the others have stated, I'm not a contester, although I do like operating field day and maybe sweepstakes. Those are the two maybe that I do like to operate. But I'm not really a contester. I'm more of a just rag chew, like to get on the air. If I hear a DX station, I might try to work it, but I don't really go, chasing after it. But CW is my favorite mode. That's where I started out as a novice. So I got my novice license in 1967. That was WA1JXR. And then back then, the novice license was only good for 1 year. You had to upgrade within a year. And so we studied up, and I didn't have any problem with code. I could easily do the code. So the 13 words a minute for the general was no problem for me. And so my friend, his dad drove me and him up to the Custom House in Boston. I can remember going up there as a 15-year-old, 14, 15-year-old, I think I was. That was pretty pretty daunting, but was able to get through that and get my general class. And then later on upgraded to extra. But so that's pretty much my story. I really enjoy the old radios. I've got a basement full of vacuum tube radios, or like I always say, the real radios that glow in the dark. I like restoring the old gear and using it. I do get on amplitude modulation from time to time with the old radios. But I do CW operation probably, most of my time. So that's my story, and I thank you all for listening. Back to you, Brian.
All right, thank you, Greg. Much appreciated, Greg, Dan. Anyone have any questions for anyone? Anyone have any comments for anyone?
Your first contact was K1BML.
JFG, thank you. Oh, I couldn't, it was on the tip of my tongue. I knew it was a KB1. I just couldn't think of the rest.